Some things are just hard to believe. They seem not only improbable, they seem impossible. And they seem to raise just as many questions as they provide answers. Like, he's risen. Now, you've probably heard that story before. You might even have believed it for most of your life. Jesus died, but he didn't stay dead. He came back to life on Easter, and the grave that had his body put in it on Friday was empty on Sunday morning. But perhaps you still have questions. After all, we don't really have any sort of experience with actual resurrections or any categories to explain them. So, can it really be? Is it really true? How'd he do that? And isn't that impossible? It all seems so confusing. And guess what? It always has been. Always has been. Even the first witnesses of Jesus' resurrection had all sorts of questions too, and skepticism and confusion were much more evident in the beginning than belief. All the people who wrote about the Bible events that happened that day in Easter mention that, but Luke particularly seems to make a point of that even Jesus' closest followers had a lot of doubts and questions about what was going on, even though they actually saw that the tomb was empty. Here's how Luke reports it. Luke chapter 24, beginning at verse 1.
On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the women took the spices they had prepared and went to the tomb. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were wondering about this, suddenly 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. In their fright, the women bowed down with their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, he is risen. Remember how he told you while he was still with you in Galilee. The Son of Man must be delivered over to the hand of sinners, be crucified, and on the 3rd day be raised again." Then they remembered his words. When they came back from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and to all the others. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the others with them who told this to the apostles. But they did not believe the women, because their words seemed to them like nonsense. Peter, however, got up and ran to the tomb. Bending over, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves, and he went away, wondering to himself what had happened.
So one of the things that stands out to me in what Luke wrote here is that none of these followers of Jesus, none of them knows what to make of what they saw or what they heard. None of them. You see them confused, perplexed, wondering, thinking that nothing about this makes any sense. All they have initially are questions. They'd seen Jesus die, they'd seen him be placed in a grave, but now going to the tomb, they found that Jesus was gone. And only in horror movies do dead bodies get up and walk, which is why all the questions here, what they saw it was impossible as far as they knew. And it made zero sense. And so they were left wondering, every single one of them. The women who were there first, let me take you back into what Luke wrote. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were wondering about, there's that word wondering, suddenly 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood before them. Now, after hearing the angel give them the explanation of why there's no body in the grave, he is risen, the women did get excited, and they ran back to tell Jesus' other friends about it. But Jesus' other friends, well, they weren't exactly excited about everything, not yet. Here's what Luke says about that. Verse 11, "But they did not believe the women, because their words seemed to them like nonsense." And we actually get the English word delirious from that word nonsense there, which gives you the impression that The other disciples, they thought these women were crazy. And then there's Peter. Next sentence, verse 12. Peter, however, got up and ran to the tomb. Bending over, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves, and he went away, wondering to himself what had happened. There's that word, wondering, again. Now, Peter didn't believe, not yet, but Peter still had to run to the tomb to check it out for himself. Peter was like that. He wanted to see and do for himself. And after seeing the empty tomb, Peter still didn't believe, but he was marveling. He was wondering. He was puzzling there. He was in some sort of a transitional phase from skepticism to belief. He's not at belief yet, but he's considering the possibilities. He looks into the empty tomb and sees that it's empty, and he starts to maybe have some hope where before there was none. Could it be? Is it possible? Peter's not sure, but he's on his way, and he's searching for evidence to confirm that the impossible just might be possible after all. So that's how it was back then. Jesus' closest followers were confused about the resurrection. They didn't understand. They had all sorts of questions. They didn't have any categories back then to explain the event any more than we do today. And while the Jews at the time believed in a general resurrection of the dead at the end of time, nothing in their belief system prepared them for an in-time resurrection of someone that they just saw crucified and dead and buried in a tomb and sealed with a great big stone and the seal of the governor and a guard posted out there to make sure that nobody was able to get out and that no grave robbers could get in. I think Luke makes a point of putting that detail in there about everybody wondering about this resurrection, because I think this is what he wants you to know. If you wonder about the resurrection of Jesus, it's okay. If you wonder about the resurrection of Jesus, it's okay. Jesus' first followers wrestled with the same sort of stuff, and they were first-hand witnesses. They didn't know what to make of what they saw. They didn't know what to make of what they heard from others. They initially thought it seemed more like nonsense than reality, and they were left questioning and wondering, just like many people are today, right? And I think that's one of Luke's big points here. God doesn't push you away just for having questions. God doesn't push you away just for having questions or doubts or wondering how all this can be true or not being able to reconcile everything that you want to believe with what you understand about how the world normally works. Intellectually, we have no experience with this resurrection thing, no categories to deal with it either. Nothing we've experienced in our life or science has shown us anything to say this resurrection is more than science fiction. And yet if we're intellectually honest, there is something here worth exploring, worth taking a deeper look at, worth asking, I wonder, rather than just dismissing the whole thing. You see, while we don't have any personal experience of the resurrection or any categories to really explain it, we do have some facts. And both skeptics and believers agree on some of those facts. Both skeptics and believers agree that Jesus of Nazareth lived, that Jesus was killed on a cross by the Romans, that Jesus was placed in a tomb, and the tomb was guarded by soldiers, and the tomb was sealed with the governor's seal, and that Jesus' grave is empty. There's no body. In fact, if there were a body, when the early followers of Jesus, days afterwards, started spreading this crazy story that Jesus had come back to life, don't you think that Jesus' opponents, the ones who had him put on the cross in the first place, would have sold tickets to the tomb and opened it up and showed people they're crazy. No, here's the body. Look, it's right here. And they didn't do that because they couldn't, because the grave was empty. There was no body. Now, there are differing explanations for that, right? But those are the facts. So what do they mean? Well, that's the question, isn't it?
Have you seen the picture of Easter? Have you seen its lines and hues? It looks like darkness turning into light. Easter looks like the old giving way to the new. It looks like a Sunday morning where the stone is rolled away. Easter looks like the prophecies fulfilled and the world will never be the same. It looks like soldiers on the ground and the angels asking the women, "Are you looking for the living among the dead?" He's not here. He has risen. Picture this. Easter looks like the enemy's plan defeated. It looks like God always does what he said. It looks like darkness, your hour is over, and death is on his deathbed. Easter looks like supreme hope and joy. Easter looks like human history has a new direction. Easter is a permanent display of God's power. It's the picture of life and resurrection. Yes, there's a painting of your past, a picture of who you were. But when you put your trust in Jesus, Easter is a picture of your future. Have you seen the picture of Easter?
So how do you move your picture of Easter from being one of questions to one of faith, even when some of the how questions remain? Well, first, remember the first point that Luke is making. God's okay with your questions and your doubts and even your skepticism. And God invites you to believe even before you have all your questions answered. And God actually encourages you to seek and to search and to examine the evidence that you do have, even as you search for more. Now check out how Luke reports that happened this first Easter. I'm reading back at verse 6, where the angel said to the women, "He is not here, he is risen. Remember how he told you while he was still with you in Galilee. The Son of Man must be delivered over into the hands of sinners, be crucified, and on the third day be raised again." And the key phrase there is remember what he told you. Remember what he said would happen. Remember that and notice it happened just like Jesus said that it would. In other words, and here's another big point that Luke is making here, the angels encouraged the women to lean into and to trust the word. To lean into and to trust the word of Jesus as they're working through all their questions. And when the women did that, when they remembered that Jesus had in fact predicted both his death and his resurrection, then they believed. And they ran to tell other people the significance of what they saw, that Jesus had just done the impossible, and it happened just like he said. He died and he rose, so it must be true, even if they couldn't understand how. And so while they probably still had some questions about the how, they no longer questioned the what. They no longer questioned the what, because even though they didn't have any categories to explain it, they came to believe that nothing is impossible for God. He's risen. He's risen indeed. Hallelujah. Now, how does that apply to us? Well, everyone has questions, right? Even people who believe the story for a long time have questions, and as Luke's shown us, that's okay. Don't stress over the questions. Live with your questions. and examine the evidence you do have and explore some more. And then, as this second big point Luke is making is, lean into and believe Jesus' word. Lean into and believe the word even if you can't understand everything about it. He's risen just as he said. And that matters. And it matters not just for the future, but also for the stuff that you're facing today. When that sort of stuff is making your heart heavy and weighing you down, and you're not sure how you're going to make it through, well, remember that Jesus did the impossible. Remember that Jesus is alive and he's helping you through that stuff. And lean into the word. And remember something else that Jesus said, besides predicting his death and resurrection and it coming about just like it did. John, Jesus' friend, records this in chapter 16 of his book. Jesus said, "I have told you all this so that you may have peace in me. Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart, because I have overcome the world." I have overcome the world. Take a moment to stop and think about that before moving on in this conversation. Where do you need to remember that particular word of Jesus right now and believe that it's true for you? I have overcome the world. It really helps to believe that and to lean into that word and trust that it's true when things get hard, doesn't it? I mean, at school, you may face bullies. On the job, you may face setbacks or have to deal with poor performance. In relationships, you may face frustrations and disappointments. In life, you may struggle sometimes with some of the consequences of your poor judgments or questionable choices, and on and on and on. And you may wonder when you're going through that, can anybody help me with that? And can anybody help me with my doubts and questions of faith when I'm going through stuff like that? Well, remember, Jesus is alive. Remember, Jesus has already done the impossible. Remember, Jesus is here for you, not only to forgive you, but to help you. And remember, Jesus told you, and his resurrection confirms that for you, I have overcome the world. And then lean into that word. Lean into that word and remember some of the other things Jesus said as well. Because if this word about rising from the dead came true, can't and won't Jesus do all those other things that he also said? So if you're struggling with loneliness, well, remember that Jesus said, I will never leave you or forsake you. Struggling with insecurity, remember that Jesus said, I have called you by name. You are mine. Struggling with brokenness, remember that Jesus said, behold, I am making everything new. Struggling with pain or sorrow or despair or heavy burdens, remember that Jesus said, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Struggling with death? Well, remember that Jesus is alive because he conquered death. And he told us, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even though he die, yet shall he live. Struggling with guilt? Again, lean into the word and remember that Jesus said, I will forgive your wickedness and remember your sin no more. Struggling with questions and doubts? Well, lean into the word and remember Luke's account of Jesus' resurrection and how it shows us that questions and doubts are okay and that you can believe even before you totally understand, and you can lean into the Word to help you. Perhaps that's why Jesus' friend John wrote this in his book. These things are written so that you may continue to believe, that by believing in him, you will have life in the power of his name. Now, if you don't believe yet, well, just keep asking your questions and follow the evidence and let it lead you toward faith. And if you do believe, but have a hard time believing that the healing can actually begin now, if you're kind of like those women at the tomb who had the belief in a future healing at the end of time, but that new life and a new start seem a long way off, well, I want you to consider that Jesus might be offering you a whole lot more. That his resurrection isn't just for the future, that it's for today. Now, most English translations start out by saying something like, on the first day of the week, or on Sunday. Because what Luke actually wrote isn't really good English. But Luke actually wrote this: the first day after Sabbath. And the first day after Sabbath, his point there being, is that Jesus' resurrection is not just about the ultimate healing of heaven. You see, the first Sabbath was that day of rest. And after Sabbath, each week was a new beginning. And so the point that Luke's making here is that Jesus' resurrection is a fresh start here and now. And that it's a new beginning here and now. A new creation here and now. A new order of things here and now. A new life with new possibilities here and now. And Luke's point by writing it that way is, let the healing begin. And let the healing begin today. And in Jesus it can and it does. Think about what a Lord who died and lived to tell about it can do with the messy stuff in your life. How he can help you through it, and how he can give you a fresh start. And don't let the questions you still have stop you from seeing that. Remember what Jesus said. And lean into that word and believe, even if life is still full of questions. All right, come to Jesus and keep coming back here to remember what Jesus said and what he did. And let the healing begin. And let it begin today.